Mizmor Shir, Mizmor Shir, Le'yom HaShabbos, Mizmor Shir, Mizmor Shir, Le'yom HaShabbos, To'im l'haidosh l'adonai, u'lezamen l'shimcha elyon, l'hagid b'boker chastecha, ve'emunoscha, ba'alei Elois. Tzadikata yifrach keyeres ba'levanon yizkeh shesulim be'beis Adonai mechatzroi Eloheinu yafrichu Oid yenuvun b'seyavo Desheyanim v'rananim yeyu lahagid ki yashar Adonai tzuri v'lai havelah saboy. Mikoy Ismaim Rabbi Madirim Mishbereyam Hadir B'Morim Adonai Yedoyesecha nemenu miyahoy leveischa navavakoyedesh Adonai leyorech A very good Shabbos to you all. Shabbos Parshas Eikev, second in the series of 7 that will lead us from between Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, which is a Sunday, and of course the final Shabbos of the year just before Rosh Hashanah. Shabbos officially starts this week at 8:35, although we tend to bring it in earlier at 8 o'clock, and it will conclude tomorrow at 9:50 in the evening. We are studying the 4th chapter of the Ethics of the Fathers. The portion that we read this week is called Eikev, and in this parsha Moshe concludes his closing address to the children of Israel, promising them that if they will fulfill the mitzvahs of the Torah, they will prosper in the land of Israel into which they are about to enter. They will conquer it and settle it in keeping with God's promise to their forefathers that he will give it to them. Moshe also rebukes them for their failings in the first generation as a people, recording the worship of the golden calf, the rebelling of Korach, the sin of the spies, we'll come to that soon, the angering of God at many places throughout their 42 journeys that took them from Egypt to across the river of the Jordan River outside the land of Israel. He says, Mamrim Hayisem, you have been rebellious against the Almighty. He says, since the day I knew you. But he speaks of God's forgiveness of their sins. And the fact that although the first set of the tablets were broken, the second set were given to them. And God inscribed them, and he gave them to them on Yom Kippur. More about that shortly. Their 40 years in the desert, says Moses to the people, was during which time God sustained them with daily manna from heaven, was to teach them that man does not live on bread alone, but by the utterance of the Almighty's mouth. In other words, everything that is given to us is by divine command. There Moshe also describes the land that they're going into as flowing with milk and honey, and blessed with the 7 kinds of fruits, or 7 kinds of things that grow. 2 of them are grains and the other 5 are fruits. And this is a place of God's providence in this world. He commands them to destroy the idols that are there and to clean out the land, and so that it should become indeed a place full of God's presence, and that it shouldn't be sullied in any way by the presence of idolatrous practices. He warns them not to become haughty and believe that I'm the only one that's in charge of my destiny. You've got to do your bit, but at the end of the day, it's God's blessing that gets you where you need to be. One of the key passages or paragraphs in this week's Sedra is the Parsha of Vahoya Im Shomaya, which is the second Parsha of the reading of the Shema. And it's so holy. It's one of those that are one of the 4 Parshas that go to the Tefillin, and the second of 2 Parshas which go in a mezuzah on the doorpost. Its overwhelming theme is that if you will listen to the Almighty's commandments and do as he asks you, then you will have the rain in its right season, which is a way of saying you will get what you need. And by and large, this is true. There are always exceptions to that, but in principle, when a Jew does what he or she is supposed to do, the Almighty gives us the blessing. And whenever we don't see the blessing coming quite as easily as it should, it means that I'm in some way lacking. I'm not doing enough to bring down God's blessing. This is a resume of the Parsha of Eikev. The yahrzeit for this week are as follows. On Sunday, Sandra Don has yahrzeit for her father. On Tuesday, Anne Heyman, not sure who that is, has yahrzeit for her mother. Barbara Picker has yahrzeit for her husband. Michael Hart, Gavin Swerdloff and Jethro Swerdloff have yahrzeit for their daughter, wife and mother respectively. Debbie Swerdloff, Devorah Bas Mordechai Yosef. Phyllis Patnick has yahrzeit for her mother, Leah Bas Yehuda David Halevi. I don't think I mentioned Anne Heyman's mother, Oleh Ashon, is Pesa Bas Menashe. And on Thursday, David Dempsey observes yahrzeit for her aunt. On Friday, Louise Kaddish observes yahrzeit for her mother. I don't have a name for either of those two. So wish everybody a little bit of a thought. Well, some information. Did you celebrate? Did you celebrate the festival? Well, the festival that was this week. Not so sure what festival we're referring to. I'll tell you. Wednesday was Chamisha Asar B'Av, the 15th of the day of Av, which the Talmud says, Yomim Tovim B'Yisrael. There was never greater festivals, the Chamisha Asar B'Av Yom HaKippurim, as great as the festival of the 15th of Av and the day of Yom Kippur. Are these festivals? Yes, they are. You'd say, what was Yom Kippur, such a festival? I mean, it's a solemn day. I wouldn't call it a festival. Well, the Talmud calls it a festival, and it says it was the greatest one of the top 2 festivals. So how come? Well, the Talmud gives us 2 reasons. Number 1, we got forgiven for the worst sin in our Jewish history, the sin of the golden calf. We got forgiven for that. And from that day onwards, that day has turned into a day of forgiveness forevermore. The day that Moses secured forgiveness for the Jewish people for the sin of the golden calf was stamped as Yom Kippur, and every time that day comes around each year, we know we get forgiven for the things that we do. We all make mistakes, and it's great, but the knowledge that you are forgiven, you can wipe the slate clean and start again, is in itself a source of great joy for those who are able to internalize it and realize the significance of it. That's pretty much everybody. I don't think there are many people who ignore Yom Kippur. Secondly, what happened on the 15th of Av? Well, let me tell you, the trouble with the 15th of Av, there's no matzah to eat, there's no cheesecake to bake, and there's no sukkah to sit in, so we don't know that it exists, a lot of us. But it is. It was a very happy day. But in order to understand this, you've got to go back a few days to the 9th of Av. How did the 9th of Av become a sad day? Well, it was like this. Shortly after the Jewish people arrived close, or they were about 3 days walk, 3 days traveling from getting into the land of Israel, they decided to send spies. Moses said, listen, you don't need no spies. They said, listen, we want to send spies, we want to check out the land beforehand. So he said, okay. So Shlach Lecha, which you read in the book of Numbers, the fourth said in the book of Numbers, is Moses sending God said to Moses, says, look, Shlach Lecha, send for yourself. I'm not telling you to do that. But if you want to do it, do it. So they send spies in, they're there for 40 days, they come back and they say, oi, 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 it's a terrible land, don't go in there, the people there are huge. Look at the fruit, they brought back these massive fruits. And the Jewish people were beside themselves. They arrived back on the 8th of Av. The night of the 9th of Av, the Jewish people went to bed crying and moaning, oh, yeah, what have we got ourselves into? We're going to this land, we will be destroyed, our children and our wives will be vanquished. And God got very upset with them. And he says, is this how you repay? It is me speaking. If I tell you to go into the land, you'll be successful, you'll conquer. And he was upset with them. He says, you know what? You don't want to go in the land, don't go in the land. And your children and your wives that you said will be vanquished, they'll be the ones that go in. And every year, on the 9th of Av, you will lose 15,000 people of the 600,000 people. And by the time 40 years are up, the whole generation will have all passed away, and you will go, and the next generation will go into the land of Israel. You cried on the 9th of Av for no reason. I'm going to give you a reason to cry. And so every year on the 9th of Av, 15 people would lay down and die. 15,000 people would lay down and die. According to the Mishnah, they dug their own graves and they lay down in them and they waited it. They accepted it. If that's God's decree, we made a mistake, this is what we have to go through. They accepted it. Came the 40th year. What they didn't know was that God had decided to knock a year off. He decided 1 year he wasn't going to. The last year the decree was annulled. Came the 9th of Av, all those who'd reached age, usually were those who hit the 60th birthday then that year sometime, they lay down in their graves. Came the 9th of Av and they waited and nothing happened. They woke up next morning and they thought, this isn't heaven, this is a grave. We're still alive. What happened? They said, you know what happened? We got the day wrong. It's tonight. So they lay down on the 10th of Av. Again, the same thing happened. They woke up the next morning, they said, we're still alive. So maybe we made a mistake again. Maybe we're 2 days out. They did this for several days till they reached the 15th of Av. By the time it became dark on the 15th of Av, they could see a full moon. There's no denying that they've passed the 9th of Av by several days already. And so the decree must have been annulled. Did they rejoice? Whoa, did they rejoice? The entire camp was singing and dancing all night. So the 9th of Av, instead of it being a day of unhappiness, became a day of rejoicing. Sorry, not the 9th of Av, the 15th of Av. And it continued. The Mishnah goes on for a number of different things that happened on the 15th of Av. You may remember the daughters of Tzlafchat questioned about how they would get a portion of the land of Israel and what would happen if they were to marry, and the portion which they inherit would then would pass over to their husband's family, because the children would always follow the family, and that would mean the tribe to which their husbands belong. So the plots of land which are given to them would then go over to the next generation. So God had said they're not to marry. They should marry only in the same tribe, but not marry outside of the tribe. Result was that for some time the tribes did not intermarry. But the rabbis concluded at the time that this was only a decree that was given to that generation, and subsequent generations, once the land has already been divided and every shevet, every tribe has got their portion, this no longer applies. And so therefore the people were allowed to get married. The date that this happened was the 15th of Av. That's the second reason people were very happy about it. A third one, Hosea did something very fundamental. There was a wicked king of Israel called Jeroboam ben Nebat, who was both a sinner and he caused others to sin. And he instructed there should be guards on the roads that led from all the different places across Israel to Jerusalem to stop people going on a pilgrimage when it came to the 3 foot festivals of Pesach, Shavuos and Sukkot. On the 15th of Av, Hosea got rid of those. Another reason for jubilation. Another one, they used to cut wood throughout the summer to be used on the altar, but wood had to be worm free. After the 15th of Av, you couldn't guarantee it anymore because the heat began to drop. So they stopped cutting wood for the altar. They'd cut it in advance and it had to last until the winter. They stopped cutting on the 15th of Av. And so they would make a whole ceremony. They'd finished a part of their service to the Almighty and they would rejoice. And the Talmud refers to it as Yom Tevar Magal, the day when they broke the saws that they used to cut the wood. And this was in the same way as when we finish a tractate of study in the Talmud, we make a celebration. So too, when they finished the jobs of cutting the wood, that too was a celebration. Furthermore, what else was there? I'm not sure if I've given all the reasons. Oh, Beitar. During the Bar Kokhba revolt against the Romans in the times of the Second Temple, there was a huge massacre in Beitar and many people were killed, and the authorities did not allow them to bury the dead. On the 15th of Av, they were allowed to bury the dead. So you can see that there's a lot of things that happened on the 15th of Av, and most of all, it used to be a day for Shidduchim, because all the girls used to gather in a certain part of Jerusalem, I think it was. They used to all have to wear white dresses and they could never wear their own dress. They also had to borrow somebody else's. So that made sure that nobody was left embarrassed. And the young men would go there seeking a bride. If the bride was pretty, the lady concerned would say, look how beautiful I am. A woman is only for her beauty. If the bride was not so they would say, look, I've got great yichus. I go back, and pedigree goes back to a very fine family. And if the girl was neither that good to look at and nor did she go back to any great pedigree, she would say, listen, it's a mitzvah, you should do it for the sake of the mitzvah, marry me. And that is a little bit of a message there, because you see, we're like the bride and the Almighty is like the groom. You look in Psalm 34, you can see that. And so we say to the Almighty, listen, if we look pretty, you should marry us. Make sure the relationship is strong. If we're not so pretty, we've got good pedigree. If our pedigree is not so good, then do it for the sake of who we are. We are your children. You're all God's children, whether you like it or not. And God will, one day, sooner or later, but hopefully sooner, God will bring us His Mashiach, and we will go out of Golos and won't have any more Tisha B'Avs. I wish you a very good Shabbos. I hope you enjoy the hot weather.